Riley sat cross-legged on the floor of the biolab, watching the small creature pace back and forth in its enclosure. The honey badger stopped, sniffed the air, then went back to exploring every corner of its space for the third time that hour. Her mother said it was looking for weaknesses, testing the boundaries, learning the environment. That was what honey badgers did. They never stopped analyzing. "Still watching that thing?" asked Petra, a young Quillen whose silver fur shimmered under the lab lights. She had come to drop off sample containers for Riley's mother. "It's so small. Why do you like it so much?" Riley shrugged. "Because it doesn't care that it's small." Petra laughed and left. Most of the aliens on the research station thought Riley was strange. Human children were considered the weakest young in the galaxy. They had no claws, no venom, no natural armor. Other species were born ready to defend themselves. Human babies couldn't even walk for a year. It made no sense to most aliens why humans brought their vulnerable offspring to border stations like this one. The station floated in contested space between three empires. Scientists from dozens of worlds worked here, studying everything from quantum mechanics to xenobiology. Riley's mother specialized in Earth creatures, trying to help other species understand why Death World animals were so different. The honey badger was her favorite example. They fight predators 10 times their size, her mother had explained during breakfast. Lions, leopards, even Cape buffalo. And they win because they're too stubborn to know they should lose. Riley had asked why they were called honey badgers. Her mother smiled and said they raided beehives for food, getting stung hundreds of times, but never giving up. Nothing stopped them. Nothing scared them. They just kept going until they got what they wanted. That was 6 hours ago. Now Riley's mother was in a meeting with the station administrators. Something about increased military activity near the border. Riley didn't pay much attention to politics. She preferred the biolab where things made sense. The alarm changed everything that IT wasn't the normal station alert. This was different, harsher, more urgent. Riley stood up as the lights shifted to red. The honey badger in the enclosure stopped pacing and stared at the door. Even the animal knew something was wrong. An explosion shook the station. Riley grabbed the table to steady herself. Another explosion. Closer. The intercom crackled to life with her mother's voice. "Riley, stay in the lab. Lock the door. Don't come out until the transmission cut off." Riley's hand shook as she moved toward the door. Through the small window, she saw people running in the corridor. Not walking quickly, running. Scientists dropped their equipment and fled. A Dreth researcher stumbled past, green blood streaming from a wound in his side. Then she saw them. The Krell. She'd seen pictures in history files. They were warriors, conquerors, a species built for combat. Each one stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark armor that looked like it was part of their bodies. They moved through the corridor with weapons raised, firing at anything that moved. Riley backed away from the door. Her heart hammered in her chest. She needed to find her mother, but the Krell were between her and the administration section. She looked around the lab for another exit. The ventilation shaft. It was small, but she was 12. She could fit. Riley climbed onto a cabinet and pried open the vent cover. The metal was cold under her fingers. She pulled herself inside, just as the lab door exploded inward. Through the vent grating, she watched 3 Krell warriors enter the room. They looked around, checked the corners, then moved on. They were searching for people, not wasting time on empty rooms. The ventilation shaft connected to the main circulation system. Riley crawled through the darkness, following the sound of voices. She had explored these tunnels before when she was bored. Her mother had scolded her for it. Now, she was grateful. She reached a junction where multiple shafts met. Below, she could see into the main corridor through another vent. Her mother was there. Relief flooded through Riley until she saw the Krell warrior standing over her. Her mother was on her knees, hands behind her head. 3 other adults knelt beside her. Scientists, diplomats, people Riley knew. The Krell commander spoke in broken English. "You surrender territory or you die. Simple choice." Riley's mother looked up at him. "We're researchers. We don't control territory. Let us contact." The shot was quick. Her mother fell forward and didn't move. The other 3 adults started screaming. The Krell shot them too. Efficient, methodical, no hesitation. Riley's hand flew to her mouth to stop the sound, trying to escape. Tears blurred her vision, but she couldn't look away. Her mother. Her mother was gone. Just gone. 10 seconds ago, she was alive, and now she wasn't. The Krell commander spoke into his communicator. Adults eliminated. Rounding up juveniles now. They will be kept in cargo bay until governments comply. 2 warriors dragged the bodies away. Riley watched from the vent, frozen. Her whole body felt numb. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But the emptiness in her chest said it was. She heard crying from another corridor. Young voices. The Krell were gathering all the children on the station. Riley thought about staying hidden. They would probably leave eventually. She could wait them out. But then she heard Petra's voice, scared and small, begging them to let her go. Riley forced herself to move. She crawled through the vents toward the cargo bay. Through the grates. She watched the Krell herd 37 children into the large room. They came from all species. Some had claws. Some had natural armor. All of them were terrified. The Krell commander stood at the door and counted them. 37. Records show 38 juveniles on station. He turned to his warriors. Find the last one. Riley knew she should stay hidden. But something in her refused. If she hid while the others were prisoners, what did that make her? She thought about the honey badger, pacing its enclosure, testing boundaries, refusing to accept limits. She crawled to a vent above the cargo bay and kicked it open. All eyes turned up as she dropped down, landing hard on the metal floor. The Krell commander walked over and looked down at her. He started laughing. The human child, smallest of the weak species. He grabbed her arm and threw her toward the other children. Riley hit the ground and rolled, pain shooting through her shoulder. All juveniles accounted for. 2 guards will watch them. The rest of you, secure the station. The Krell left except for 2 warriors at the door. They looked bored. Children weren't threats. This was guard duty, nothing more. Riley sat up slowly and looked at the other children. They stared at her with pity. The poor human girl. So fragile. So helpless. They didn't know that she'd just watched her mother die. They didn't know that something had broken inside her, or maybe something had woken up. She thought about the honey badger again. How it fought animals that should kill it easily. How it never stopped, never gave up, never accepted defeat. Her mother had called her stubborn like that. Said she was her little honey badger when she wouldn't quit on problems. Riley's hand stopped shaking. The numbness faded, replaced by something cold and clear. The Krell had made a mistake. They thought human children were weak. They were about to learn why that assumption was wrong. Earth didn't raise prey animals. It raised survivors, and survivors didn't wait to be rescued. They fought back. The cargo bay was cold. Riley could see her breath in the air. The Krell had turned down the temperature to keep everyone docile. It was working on most of the children. They huddled together in groups, sharing body heat, whimpering quietly. The 2 guards stood by the door, talking in their own language, occasionally glancing at the prisoners with contempt. Riley sat apart from the others, her back against a crate. Her mind was racing, but her body was still. She was thinking about her mother's research, about all the hours spent in the biolab learning about Earth animals. At the time, it had seemed like just something to do. Now it felt like preparation. Honey badgers were small. Most predators that saw them assumed they would be easy prey. That assumption usually got the predator hurt. Honey badgers had thick skin that was hard to bite through. They could twist inside their own skin to fight back even when grabbed. They went for vulnerable spots. Eyes, throats, soft tissue. They used everything around them as a weapon. But the real advantage was simpler. They didn't panic. When threatened, they didn't freeze or flee. They assessed, adapted, and attacked. Riley looked around the cargo bay with new eyes. Not a prison, an environment. The Krell had locked them in a room full of equipment, supplies, and tools. Stupid. They were so confident that children couldn't fight that they hadn't even cleared the space properly. She stood up slowly. Her legs were stiff and her shoulders still hurt from being thrown, but she could move. She walked to a stack of containers marked with hazard symbols. Maintenance supplies. The guards glanced at her, but didn't move. What threat could a human child pose? Riley opened one container. Cleaning chemicals. strong ones used for scrubbing the station's air filtration systems. She'd help her mother clean the biolab with similar stuff. It burned if you got on your skin. It would do worse if it got in someone's eyes. She moved to another area where a damaged cargo loader sat against the wall. Its frame was bent, but the hydraulic lines were intact. She could use those. She found wire in a repair kit, a heavy pipe that had broken off something, and a med kit with sedative injectors. One of the other children approached. It was Petra, the young Quillen who had visited the biolab earlier. Her silver fur was matted with dirt, and her eyes were red from crying. She watched Riley gathering items with confusion. "What are you doing?" Petra whispered. Riley didn't look up. "Preparing." "For what?" "To get out of here." Petra's ears flattened against her head. "We can't fight them. They're Krell warriors. They killed all the adults. We're just children." Riley stopped and looked at her. "They killed my mother. They killed everyone's parents. And they think we'll just sit here until our governments give them what they want. But they're wrong." "How?" Petra's voice cracked. "How can we possibly fight them?" Riley pointed to the guards. "They left 2 warriors to watch 37 of us. They think we're helpless. That's their mistake." She went back to sorting through supplies. "Humans don't have claws or armor. We're not born strong, but we're born clever. And right now, clever is better." A young Dreth boy crawled over. His name was something Riley couldn't pronounce, so she'd always called him Green, which he seemed to like. His species had acidic saliva that could burn through metal given enough time. He looked at the items Riley had collected. "You have a plan?" he asked. "Yes, but I need help." Riley looked at both of them. "Petra, your species can see heat signatures through walls, right? And Green, your saliva is acidic. I need both of you if this is going to work." Petra shook her head. "The guard will stop us. We can't even get close to them. We don't have to get close yet. First, we make them come to us." Riley picked up the pipe and handed it to Green. "Can you spit on this? Cover it completely. I need it to be slippery and dangerous." Green hesitated, then did as she asked. The metal hissed as his saliva coated it. Riley wrapped cloth around one end so she could hold it without burning herself. She tested the weight. Heavy, but she could swing it. More children gathered around, curious and scared. Riley explained her plan in simple terms. Create a distraction at the far end of the cargo bay. When one guard comes to investigate, the other has to choose between helping or staying at his post. Either way, one of them will be alone, and that's when they strike. "Strike with what?" asked an older boy from a species Riley didn't recognize. He had 4 arms and natural body armor. "We have nothing." Riley held up the pipe. "We have this. We have chemicals. We have each other." She looked at all of them. The Krell think children are weak because most species protect their young until they're grown. But humans evolve differently. We're vulnerable when we're born, so we learn to be smart instead of strong. We learn to use tools. We learn to cooperate. We learn to turn anything into a weapon. The 4-armed boy crossed his arms. "You're talking about killing them." "Yes." Riley's voice was flat. "They killed our parents. They're going to kill us too, eventually. Maybe not today, but when they don't need hostages anymore. So either we wait to die, or we fight back." Silence filled the cargo bay. The children looked at each other, then at Riley. She was the smallest one there, the weakest species. But something in her eyes was different now. Something hard and cold and determined. Petra spoke first. "What do you need me to do?" Riley smiled for the first time since her mother died. It wasn't a happy smile. "I need you to watch the guards through the wall. Tell me when one of them is in the right position. Then we start." Over the next hour, Riley organized the children into teams. She explained each person's role. Who would create the distraction? Who would be ready with the chemical weapons? Who would help restrain the guards once they were down? She made them practice movements quietly, testing their coordination. The Krell guards noticed the activity, but didn't care. Children huddling together, probably trying to comfort each other. Pathetic. They went back to their conversation, bored with guard duty. Riley checked her makeshift weapons one more time. The pipe with acidic coating. The cleaning chemicals in squeeze bottles. Wire for binding. The sedative injectors from the medkit. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. She thought about her mother one more time. Thought about the honey badger in the biolab, fearless and relentless. Thought about what it meant to be human. They weren't the strongest species. They weren't the toughest. But they were the species that survived. They were the species that adapted. They were the species that refused to quit. Riley looked at the other children. They were scared but ready. She had given them something the Krell couldn't understand. Hope, purpose, a chance to fight back instead of waiting to die. Remember, she whispered to all of them, we only get one shot at this. They think we're helpless. Let's show them what a mistake looks like. Petra positioned herself where she could see through the wall using her heat vision. Green held the chemical bottles. The four-armed boy stood ready to help tackle the guard. Others waited in their positions, hearts pounding, knowing that everything was about to change. Riley gave the signal. A young Sorn at the far end of the cargo bay began making a loud noise, banging on containers, screaming for help. The guards looked at each other. One started walking toward the disturbance. The other stayed at his post, but turned to watch what was happening. Riley moved into the shadows, pipe in hand, and waited. The honey badger didn't attack unless the moment was right. It was patient. It was smart. It knew when to strike. The guard got closer to the disturbance, weapon raised. He didn't see Riley in the darkness beside a stack of crates. He didn't see the other children moving into position. He only saw a scared child making noise that Riley's grip tightened on the pipe. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady. One chance. That was all they had. The guard was 3 steps away, 0.2 steps. Riley swung the pipe with everything she had. The pipe hit the guard's knee joint exactly where the armor segments connected. Riley had studied the way they moved, noticed where the protection was weakest. The Krell's leg buckled, and he started to fall forward. Before he could catch himself, Green threw the chemical mixture directly into his face. The warrior's scream was loud enough to echo through the cargo bay. The second guard spun toward the sound, raising his weapon. But Petra had already told Riley where he would be standing. 3 children tackled him from behind, their combined weight enough to knock him off balance. He tried to shake them off, but the four-armed boy grabbed his weapon arm while others went for his legs. Riley ran toward the first guard, who was clawing at his burning eyes. She didn't hesitate. The pipe came down on his head, then his neck, then his head again. She hit him until he stopped moving. Green added his acidic saliva to exposed areas. The smell was terrible, but Riley didn't stop. Couldn't stop. If he got up, they were all dead. The second guard threw off 2 children and reached for his communicator. Riley sprinted across the cargo bay and drove the pipe into his wrist. Bones cracked. He roared in pain and backhanded her across the room. Riley hit a crate hard, stars exploding in her vision. But the communicator had fallen from his broken wrist. The four-armed boy picked it up and crushed it. Other children swarmed the guard, holding his arms, pulling at his armor, anything to keep him down. He was strong enough to hurt them, throwing them aside one by one, but there were too many. When he tried to stand, Riley was there again with the pipe, striking at his knees until both legs gave out. Petra appeared with wire from the repair kit. Together with 3 others, they wrapped it around the guard's arms and neck. He thrashed and fought, but the wire held. Riley found the sedative injectors in a medkit and jammed all 3 into his neck where the armor didn't cover. It took 2 minutes for him to stop struggling. 2 minutes that felt like hours. When it was finally over, both guards were dead or dying. The cargo bay was silent except for heavy breathing. Children stood around staring at what they had done. Some were crying. Others looked sick. One was vomiting in the corner that Riley's hands were covered in green Krell blood. Her shoulder throbbed where she'd been hit. Her whole body was shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. But she forced herself to move. They didn't have time for shock or guilt. Strip them, she said. Her voice sounded strange. Flat. Take their weapons, their armor pieces, anything useful. Nobody moved. They just stared at her. Now, Riley's shout made them jump. There are 23 more Krell on this station. They're going to check on the guards eventually. When they find them dead, they'll kill us all. So we need to move. We need weapons. We need a plan. And we need to do it right now. That got them moving. The children approached the bodies carefully, pulling off equipment. The weapons were too heavy for most of them to use properly, but Riley took one anyway. She could barely lift it, but maybe she wouldn't have to. Maybe just having it would help. Petra brought her a communication device. I don't know how to use it. Riley turned it over in her hands. The controls were labeled in Krell language, which she couldn't read. But the buttons were simple enough. On, off, channel selector. She turned it on and heard Krell voices discussing patrol routes. She turned it off quickly before anyone noticed. Can you access the station systems? Asked Green. His scales were stained with blood, both his own acidic spit blood mix and Krell blood. Your mother had codes, right? Riley nodded. Her mother had given her emergency access codes years ago. She'd never thought she would need them. She found a wall panel and entered the codes. The system accepted them. Suddenly, she was looking at a map of the entire station with red dots showing Krell positions. 23 warriors, just like the commander had said. They were spread out in groups of 3 or 4, securing key areas. Command center, engine room, docking bay, life support, standard military takeover pattern. What are you thinking? Petra stood beside her, looking at the map. Riley studied it for a long moment. They're confident. They've got the station locked down. All the adults are dead. They think we're just cargo to guard. She pointed at the map. But this station has maintenance tunnels connecting everything. Ventilation shafts, crawl spaces, places big Krell warriors can't fit, but children can. You want to attack them? The four-armed boy sounded incredulous. We barely survived 2 guards. How are we supposed to fight 23 trained warriors? We don't fight them head-on. We can't win that way. Riley pulled up the station's environmental controls. But I can control the gravity, the atmosphere, the lights, the locks on every door. They're soldiers, which means they think like soldiers. Straight lines, direct confrontation, clear objectives. But we're children. We can think different, be unpredictable. She turned to face all of them. 37 children from a dozen different species, scared and traumatized, but still standing. Still alive. They had just killed 2 Krell warriors. It seemed impossible, but they had done it. Listen to me, Riley said. Right now, the Krell think they won. They secured the station, killed the threats, locked up the kids. Mission accomplished, but they're wrong. The mission just started, because we're not going to wait here for rescue. We're going to take back our station. How? Someone asked. Riley pointed at the map. There are 4 warriors in the command center, 3 in the engine room, 4 in the docking bay, 3 watching life support. The rest are on patrol. We're going to separate them, confuse them, and eliminate them one group at a time. Eliminate? Petra's voice was small. You mean kill them? Yes. Riley didn't look away from the map. I know what that sounds like. I know what it makes us. But they killed our parents. They were going to use us as hostages and then probably kill us anyway. So we have 2 choices. We wait here and hope for rescue that might never come, or we fight back with everything we have. The cargo bay was quiet. Riley could hear her own heartbeat. She knew what she was proposing was insane. Children fighting trained warriors. But humans had survived for thousands of years by doing insane things when cornered, by being clever instead of strong, by refusing to accept that size and strength were the only things that mattered. I'm in, Green said quietly. They killed my father. I want them to pay. Me too, Petra added. Tell us what to do. One by one, the others agreed. Even the four-armed boy who had doubted nodded his acceptance. They were committed now. All of them. Children turned into soldiers by necessity and rage. Riley pulled up the environmental controls again. First, we're going to turn off the lights in sections where Krell are patrolling. Petra, you can see in darkness using heat vision. You'll guide strike teams. Green, your acid is a weapon. Use it on exposed areas, joints and armor, anywhere vulnerable. She looked at the four-armed boy. What's your name? Dax. Dax, you're strong. When we take down warriors, you help restrain them. Hold them still so others can finish it. She pointed at a young, poor-thin girl who had been quiet the whole time. Your species can camouflage, right? Change colors to match surroundings. The girl nodded. Good. You scout ahead. Make sure we're not walking into traps. Riley turned back to the map. We have advantages they don't know about. We know this station. We can fit in small spaces. We can use the environment as a weapon. And most importantly, they think we're helpless. That's the biggest advantage of all. She entered commands into the system. The lights in Corridor 7 went dark. A moment later, she heard confused Krell voices through the stolen communicator. Good. Let them be confused. Let them wonder what was happening. We start with the patrol in Corridor 7, Riley said. 3 warriors. We'll use the maintenance tunnel to get behind them, cut off their retreat, and hit them in the darkness. Petra guides us. Green and I attack. Dax and 3 others help restrain. The rest stay here and guard our exit route. She looked at all of them one more time. This is dangerous. Some of us might die. But if we do nothing, we all die. At least this way, we're fighting back. At least this way, we're not making it easy for them. Dax stepped forward. What should we call you? You're leading this. You need a name. Riley thought about the biolab, about the honey badger pacing its enclosure, fearless and relentless, about her mother's voice calling her stubborn, about what it meant to refuse to quit even when quitting was easier. Call me Badger, she said, and let's teach these warriors why you don't corner human children on their own territory. The maintenance tunnel was barely tall enough for Riley to crouch in. The metal was cold under her hands as she crawled forward, Petra right behind her, followed by 8 other children. They moved slowly, quietly, their breathing the only sound. Through the walls, Riley could hear Krell voices discussing the power fluctuation that had killed the lights in Corridor 7. Probably a damaged relay, one warrior said. I'll check the junction box. Make it quick, another replied. The commander wants status reports every hour. Riley held up her hand, signaling everyone to stop. She pressed her ear against the tunnel wall. 3 sets of heavy footsteps. 3 warriors, just like the map showed. They were standing in darkness now, probably using their armor's night vision systems. That would make them confident. Confident was good. Confident meant careless. Petra touched Riley's shoulder and pointed ahead. Her heat vision showed her exactly where the Krell were positioned. She used hand signals to communicate. 1 warrior near the junction box. 2 others standing guard 10 meters apart. They weren't watching the maintenance access panels, because why would they? Children couldn't hurt them. Riley checked her weapons. The pipe with Green's acidic coating. A chemical bottle. White. A broken piece of sharp metal sheet found. Not much, but it would have to work. She looked at the other children and saw fear in their eyes. Good. Fear kept you alert. It was panic that got you killed. She pointed at Green and Dax, then at the access panel beneath the nearest guard. They understood. Wait for her signal, then strike fast. She pointed at 2 others and indicated the second panel. Multiple attacks at once. Overwhelm them before they could react. Riley positioned herself at the 3rd access panel, directly under where Petra said the junction box warrior would be. She counted down on her fingers. 3, 2, 1. All 3 panels open at once. Riley came up behind the Krell warrior with a sharp metal piece aimed at the gap between his helmet and chest armor. She drove it in with both hands, felt it catch and tear. The warrior made a choked sound and spun around, but she was already dropping back through the panel. Green exploded from his panel, spitting acid directly into another warrior's face while Dax grabbed his legs and pulled him down. The Krell fell hard, his weapon firing wild shots that hit the ceiling. 3 children swarmed him with wire and pipes. The 3rd warrior saw what was happening and reached for his communicator. Riley came at him from behind, using the heavy Krell weapon she'd taken from the cargo bay guards. She couldn't aim it properly, but she could swing it like a club. It hit his arm, and the communicator went flying. He turned on her, fast despite his size, and his armored fist caught her in the chest. Riley flew backward, hit the wall, couldn't breathe. The warrior advanced on her, drawing a combat knife. Riley scrambled back, but there was nowhere to go. Then Petra was there, along with 4 others, throwing the chemical mixture in his eyes and pulling at his legs. He thrashed and swung, hitting 2 children hard enough to break bones, but more kept coming. They were like insects swarming something larger. Individually weak, but together overwhelming. Riley forced air back in her lungs and grabbed the knife the warrior had dropped. She crawled forward and drove it into the back of his knee where the armor joint was weakest. He fell. They were on him instantly, all of them together, holding him down until he stopped moving. 3 warriors down. 20 more to go. Riley sat against the wall, coughing and trying to catch her breath. Her chest hurt where she'd been hit. Probably cracked ribs. Two of the other children were hurt worse. One had a broken arm. Another was unconscious. But they had one. Again, children against trained warriors, and the children had won. "We need to move," Dax said. He was breathing hard, his forearms shaking with adrenaline. "That weapon discharged. Others will investigate." Riley nodded and stood, wincing at the pain. "Everyone who's hurt, back to the cargo bay. The rest of us continue." "Petra, where's the nearest patrol?" Petra accessed a wall panel, her claws dancing across the controls. She was learning the station systems faster than Riley had expected. 2 warriors in Corridor 12. 4 in the command center. 3 just left the engine room, heading toward our position. They heard the shots. Riley thought fast. "We use the gravity controls. Turn it off in Corridor 12. When the 2 warriors float, we attack from the maintenance shafts. Take their weapons and armor." "What about the 3 heading here?" Green asked. "We seal this section. Lock all the doors between us and them. Make them go the long way around while we hit Corridor 12. Riley pulled up the door controls and started locking bulkheads. "If we're fast enough, we can hit 2 more groups before they realize what's happening." They split up. Half went back to the cargo bay with the wounded. The rest followed Riley through the maintenance tunnels toward Corridor 12. Her whole body hurt, but she pushed through it. Pain meant she was alive. Dead people didn't feel pain. Corridor 12 was quiet when they arrived. 2 Krell warriors stood guard near the docking bay entrance, probably making sure no one tried to escape on the ships. They looked bored. Guard duty on a secured station with only children as prisoners. This was probably the easiest assignment they'd ever had. Riley accessed the environmental controls from a hidden panel. The gravity controls were simple. On or off. She turned them off. Both warriors immediately began floating, arms and legs windmilling as they tried to find purchase. Riley had grown up on stations. She knew how to move in zero gravity. Most of the other children did too. The Krell were ground troops, used to having their feet planted. The children came from above and below, from maintenance shafts on all sides. In zero gravity, there was no up or down. Just confused warriors trying to orient themselves while small shapes swarmed them from every direction. Wire wrapped around limbs. Chemicals splashed on exposed areas. Sharp metal pieces found gaps in armor. IT was brutal and efficient. The warriors never had a chance to use their weapons properly. In gravity, they were stronger and tougher. Without gravity, they were just targets. 2 more down. 18 remaining. Riley took 1 warrior's armor pieces. They were too big, but Dax helped her secure them. Now she had protection. She took the warrior's weapon too, a rifle that was lighter than the first one she'd grabbed. She could actually aim this one. "Command center next," she said. "For warriors. That's their hub. If we take it, we control the whole station." Petra shook her head. "That's the most heavily defended position. They'll be ready. They won't be ready for us." Riley studied the map. "Because we're not going through the door. We're going through the ventilation system, straight into the room from above. We flood it with sedative gas from medical storage, then take them while they're weak. The gas will affect us too," Green pointed out. "Not if we hold our breath. Humans can hold breath for 2 minutes if we have to. How long can your species manage?" They discussed it. Most could hold for at least 90 seconds. It would be tight but possible. Riley accessed medical storage remotely and found the emergency sedative canisters. They were designed for station-wide deployment in case of dangerous animal escapes from the biolabs. Her mother had shown her how they worked. 20 minutes later, they were positioned in the ventilation shaft above the command center. Riley could see through the grate. For Krell warriors monitoring screens, discussing patrol reports. They were worried now. 6 warriors weren't responding. Something was wrong, but they couldn't figure out what. "Children can't fight," the commander was saying. "Find a malfunction. Check the systems. There must be a technical issue causing communication problems." Riley almost laughed. They were so convinced that children were helpless that they were inventing technical problems rather than considering the obvious answer. She held up 3 fingers. 2. 1. Green dropped the sedative canister through the vent. It hit the floor and began hissing immediately, filling the room with thick gas. The Krell reacted fast, reaching for masks, but Riley had already locked all the storage compartments remotely. No masks, no escape, just breathing in a sedative with every breath. Riley held hers and counted. 30 seconds. The warriors were stumbling now, confused, trying to reach the door she'd locked. 60 seconds. Her lungs burned, but she kept counting. 90 seconds. The warriors were on their knees, movements sluggish. 120 seconds. She opened a vent and dropped into the room, immediately opening the air circulation to clear the gas. The other children followed. All 4 warriors were alive, but barely conscious. Riley zip-tied their hands and feet with supplies she'd grabbed from maintenance. Now they controlled the command center. She sat at the main console and pulled up every system on the station. Power, life support, communications, weapons, doors, everything. We own the station now, she said quietly. They just don't know it yet. Dax looked at the remaining red dots on the map. 14 warriors left. What do we do? Riley studied their positions. Engine room, 3 warriors. Docking bay, 4 warriors. Life support, 3 warriors. Front patrol. An idea formed, cold and ruthless. We vent the atmosphere in the engine room. Lock them in. They'll die in minutes. The other children stared at her. Even Green looked shocked. That's murder, Petra whispered. No, Riley said. Murder is what they did to our parents. This is war. And in war, you use every advantage. They're stronger than us, tougher than us, but we're smarter. And right now, smart wins. She entered the commands before anyone could stop her. The rescue ships arrived 4 hours after Riley sent the distress beacon. By then it was over. 23 Krell warriors dead or captured. 37 children alive. The station was a mess of sealed compartments, vented sections, and emergency lighting, but it was secure. Riley sat in the command center chair, too small for it, her feet not reaching the floor. She was covered in blood, both her own and others. Her ribs were definitely broken. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. But she had done it. They had done it. Commander Harris of the Earth Alliance Fleet was the first one through the door. He was a big man with gray hair and medals on his uniform. He stopped when he saw Riley, then saw the bound Krell warriors on the floor, then saw the tactical displays showing what had happened throughout the station. Dear God, he whispered. What happened here? Riley looked at him with empty eyes. We survived. The next few hours were chaos. Medics rushing in, treating injured children. Military personnel securing the Krell prisoners. Diplomats trying to understand what had happened. Everyone kept asking Riley questions, but she barely heard them. Her mind kept replaying her mother falling. The feeling of the pipe hitting the guard. The sound of the engine room decompressing with warriors screaming inside. They took her to medical. A doctor, a kind woman named Stevens, examined her ribs and gave her something for the pain. Riley sat on the bed, staring at nothing while Stevens worked. You're very brave, Stevens said gently. I'm not brave. I just didn't want to die. You saved all those children. I killed people. Riley's voice was flat. Children shouldn't kill people. Stevens was quiet for a moment, wrapping Riley's ribs. No, they shouldn't. But sometimes the world doesn't give us choices. Sometimes we do what we have to do to survive. That doesn't make you bad. It makes you human. A counselor came next, a free named Distant Star, which was the closest translation of their actual name. They had soft features and a calm voice. They sat beside Riley's bed and waited patiently. I watched my mother die, Riley said suddenly. 10 seconds before that, she was alive. Then she wasn't. Just gone. And I hid in the vents and watched. You were protecting yourself. That's not wrong. Then I killed the guards who put us in the cargo bay. I hit one of them until he stopped moving. Is that wrong? Distant Star considered carefully. Do you think it was wrong? I think I should feel bad about it. But I don't. Not really. Riley looked at her hands. I keep thinking about the honey badger in my mom's lab. It fought things bigger than it because that's what it does. It survives. And I survived. We all survived because I was willing to do what the Krell didn't think children could do. What's that? Fight back. Be dangerous. Kill when necessary. She met the counselor's eyes. Does that make me a monster? No. It makes you someone who faced an impossible situation and refused to give up. The galaxy sees you as a hero. Those children are alive because of you. I'm not a hero. Heroes don't vent atmosphere to kill 3 people at once. Heroes don't plan ambushes that leave bodies in maintenance tunnels. Heroes don't turn children into soldiers. Distant Star was quiet for a long time. You're right. Heroes don't do those things, but survivors do. And sometimes surviving is the only heroic thing left to do. News of the incident spread fast. The Honey Badger incident, they were calling it. Military analysts studied Riley's tactics, the improvised weapons, the use of the environment, the psychological warfare of making the enemy doubt their assumptions. A 12-year-old human child with no training had defeated a Krell assault team through pure adaptive intelligence. The Krell Empire issued a statement. They called it an unfortunate misunderstanding of human juvenile capabilities and claimed the assault team had acted without authorization. Nobody believed them, but it let everyone avoid a war. The Krell quietly added new intelligence assessments about humans. One line became famous. Do not engage human juveniles in confined spaces. Threat level reassessed to critical. The other children called themselves Badger's Pack now. They sent Riley messages constantly. Pictures, videos, words of thanks and support. They were struggling too. Nightmares, flashbacks, guilt. But they were alive to struggle, and they wanted her to know she wasn't alone. Riley read every message but rarely responded. What could she say? That she was proud of them? That killing Krell warriors was something to celebrate? It wasn't. It was just something they had survived. 3 weeks after the incident, Riley was released from medical and sent to Earth to live with her aunt in Seattle. The city was overwhelming after months on a quiet research station. Too many people, too much noise, too many questions from strangers who recognized her face from news reports. Her aunt tried to help, but she didn't understand. Nobody understood except the other children who had been there. Riley started having video calls with them. Petra, Green, Dax, and others. They talked about normal things mostly. School, weather, hobbies, anything but the station. But sometimes in the middle of a conversation, someone would go quiet and everyone would know they were remembering. Therapy helped some. Riley went twice a week and talked about her mother, about the violence, about the guilt that came and went like waves. Her therapist said it would get easier with time. Riley wasn't sure she believed that. One day, a package arrived. Inside was a stuffed honey badger toy and a note from Commander Harris. Your mother would be proud, not because you fought, but because you refused to let those children die when all the adults failed them. That takes courage that most people never have to find. You found it. That matters. Riley put the stuffed animal on her shelf and stared at it for a long time. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory, talking about persistence and stubbornness and never giving up. She had called Riley her little honey badger when she wouldn't quit on difficult problems. Now, the whole galaxy called her that. It was strange and uncomfortable and somehow appropriate. School was harder than expected. The other students knew who she was. Some treated her like a celebrity. Others were afraid of her. A few tried to bully her, testing whether the honey badger was real or just media hype. Those attempts stopped quickly when Riley stared them down with the same cold eyes she'd had in the cargo bay. Teachers didn't know how to handle her either. She was 12, but she'd seen and done things most adults never would. How do you teach someone who had already learned the hardest lessons about survival and sacrifice? Riley kept to herself mostly. She did her schoolwork. She went to therapy. She answered messages from Badger's Pack. She existed, but she didn't feel like she was living. Just going through motions, waiting for something she couldn't name. Then came the invitation. The families of the children she'd saved wanted to hold a memorial for everyone who died on the station. They asked if Riley would speak. She almost said no. She didn't want to relive it. Didn't want to stand in front of people and pretend she was okay. But Petra sent her a message. We need you there. Not as Badger, just as Riley, the girl who saved us. Please. Riley agreed. The memorial was held on neutral station space, attended by families from dozens of worlds. Thousands of beings gathered to honor the dead and celebrate the survivors. Riley stood backstage, her heart pounding, her hands sweating. She'd faced Krell warriors, but speaking in public terrified her. Petra appeared beside her. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready." "I'm never going to be ready." Riley took a deep breath. "But I'm going to do it anyway. Because that's what we do, right? We do the hard thing, even when we're scared." Petra smiled. "That's what Badger taught us." Riley walked on a stage. Thousands of eyes watched her. She was small and young and still healing from broken ribs. But she stood straight and spoke clearly. "Everyone asks me how a human child defeated trained warriors. They want tactics and strategies and tricks. But that's not the real story." She paused. "The real story is that we were all just kids who wanted our parents back. And when we couldn't have that, we decided we wouldn't let anyone else's parents die if we could stop it." She looked at the other survivors in the crowd. "My mom studied earth animals. She taught me about honey badgers. They're small and the world is dangerous, but they don't care. They fight anyway. They survive anyway." She said I was like that, stubborn and persistent. Riley's voice cracked, but she kept going. She was right. And when they threatened us, we became what we needed to be. We became survivors. The applause was overwhelming, but Riley barely heard it. She just wanted to finish and sit down. Humans aren't special because we're strong. We're special because we don't quit. Ever. And if you corner us, we'll use everything we have to fight back. That's not a threat. It's just the truth about what evolution on Earth teaches. Survive at all costs. Adapt or die. Never give up. She left the stage to more applause and found her aunt waiting with tears in her eyes. Riley let herself be hugged, let herself cry into her aunt's shoulder, let herself be 12 years old instead of Badger for just a few minutes. 8 months after the memorial, Riley sat in a classroom at Lincoln High School in Seattle, pretending to pay attention to her history teacher. The lesson was about the formation of the Galactic Council. She already knew most of it from living on the research station, but she took notes anyway. Normal students took notes. She was trying to be normal. The bell rang, and she gathered her things quickly. If she moved fast, she could avoid the stares and whispers that followed her everywhere. The girl who killed Krell warriors. The honey badger. She just wanted to be Riley again, but nobody seemed to remember that person. "Riley, wait." Her teacher, Mr. Wilson, gestured for her to stay. "I wanted to talk to you about the college fair next week. Several military academies are recruiting, and they specifically asked if you'd be attending." Riley shook her head. "I'm not joining the military. They're very interested in your tactical abilities. Your improvisational skills under pressure are remarkable for someone your age. I'm 12. I shouldn't have tactical abilities." She headed for the door. "Tell them no thanks." She made it to her locker when her phone buzzed. A message from Green. "Emergency pack meeting tonight. Something important. Please come." Riley sighed. The pack meetings happen monthly now, all the survivors connecting via video to check on each other. Usually they were just catching up, sharing their struggles, being there for each other. But when Green said emergency, he meant it. That evening, Riley joined the video call from her bedroom. 37 faces appeared on screen, filling her display with familiar friends. Petra, Green, Dax, and all the others she'd fought beside. They looked older now, not physically but in their eyes. They'd all seen too much. "Thanks for coming," Petra said. She looked nervous. "We need to make a decision together. The Galactic Council wants to create a new training program, teaching all species young basic survival and resistance tactics. They want to model it on what we did on the station, and they want us involved." Riley felt cold. "They want to turn children into soldiers." "No," Dax said quickly. "They want to teach children how to survive when adults can't protect them. There's a difference. What happened to us, it could happen again. Other stations, other attacks. Kids need to know they're not helpless. We weren't trained," Riley pointed out. "We just did what we had to." "Exactly." Green scales shifted colors with emotion. "But what if we'd known more? What if we'd practiced together before? Maybe fewer of us would have been hurt. Maybe we would have been faster, more efficient." A young Sorn spoke up. "My parents don't want me to do it. They say I should forget what happened and move on. But I can't forget. And I don't want other kids to go through what we did without knowing they can fight back." The discussion went on for an hour. Some wanted to help with the training program. Others wanted to distance themselves from the violence. Riley listened without saying much. She understood both sides. Part of her wanted to help, to turn their trauma into something useful. But another part just wanted to be a normal kid who didn't have to think about tactics and survival. Riley, Petrus said gently, "You're the reason we're all alive. What do you think?" Riley was quiet for a long moment. "I think what we did was necessary and terrible. I think children shouldn't have to know how to kill. But I also think the galaxy proved that adults can't always protect us. So maybe we do need to learn, not how to be soldiers, but how to survive." She paused. "I'll help, but only if we do it right. Not training kids to fight wars. Training them to survive until rescue comes. There's a difference." The pack voted. 29 said yes. 8 said no, but supported the other's choice. They would work with the Galactic Council to develop a new program. The Persistence Initiative, they called it. Teaching children of all species that they weren't helpless, that survival was a skill that could be learned, that size and strength weren't everything. News of the initiative spread quickly. Some praised it as progressive and practical. Others called it militarization of children. Human parents were especially divided. Earth's history was full of child soldiers, and many worried this was a step toward normalizing that again. Riley gave one interview to address the concerns. She sat across from a journalist named Sandra Lee who had covered the original incident. "Is this about creating child soldiers?" Sandra asked directly. "No, it's about making sure kids know they have options when cornered. Fight or flight or freeze, those are instincts. We're teaching flight when possible, fight when necessary, and never freeze. That's not militarization. That's survival education. But you killed people. You were 12 years old, and you killed trained warriors." "Yes." Riley didn't look away. "And I wish I hadn't had to. But they killed my mother. They were going to kill all of us. So I did what humans do. I adapted. I used tools. I worked with others. I survived." She leaned forward. "That's what this program teaches. Not how to kill, but how to survive. And if more kids learn that, maybe fewer of them will have to do what I did." The interview went viral. The debate continued, but the program moved forward. Riley worked with military trainers and child psychologists to develop the curriculum. Basic situational awareness, environmental assessment, improvised tools, cooperation under stress, escape and evasion, and always, the emphasis that fighting was the last resort when everything else failed. 6 months later, the first pilot program launched on 3 stations. Riley visited one to observe. She watched children from various species learning how to assess their surroundings, identify resources, work together in crisis situations. It was strange seeing it taught formally when she just made it up as she went out. A young human boy approached her during a break. He was maybe 9 years old, small for his age. "Are you really the honey badger?" Riley knelt down to his level. "My name is Riley. Badger is just a nickname. My dad says you're a hero, that you saved all those kids when the adults couldn't. I did what I had to do. That's not the same as being a hero." The boy looked confused. "What's the difference?" Riley thought about that. Heroes are brave and noble. What I was desperate and stubborn. I refused to quit, even when quitting would have been easier. That's not heroic. It's just human. My teacher says humans are special because we don't give up. Your teacher is right. We're not the strongest or the fastest, but we're the species that keeps trying. That's our real advantage." She smiled at him. "And this program? It's teaching you that you're never helpless. You always have options. You can always do something, even if it's small. That adds up." The boy nodded seriously and ran back to his class. Riley watched him go and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Maybe they could turn the tragedy into something positive. Maybe other children wouldn't have to learn these lessons the way she did. That evening, Riley received a message from the Krell Empire. It was an official communication, formal and stiff. An apology for the incident. An acknowledgement that their warriors had underestimated human capabilities. And a request. Would she be willing to speak to Krell military cadets about tactical adaptation and improvisation? Riley stared at the message for a long time. The Krell wanted her to teach them what she'd learned killing their warriors. It was absurd. It was insulting. It was also practical. If she could help them understand humans better, maybe there would be fewer conflicts. Maybe her mother's death could mean something beyond just survival. She accepted. 3 months later, Riley stood in a Krell military academy, facing 200 cadet warriors. They were young by Krell standards, but still twice her size. They looked at her with open skepticism. This tiny human child had killed their finest warriors? Impossible. Riley didn't try to impress them with bravado. She just told the truth. You lost on that station because you made assumptions. You assumed children were helpless. You assumed small meant weak. You assumed that superior strength and weapons guaranteed victory. She pulled up a hologram of the station. These assumptions killed 23 of your warriors. Let me show you how. She walked them through each engagement. The ambush in the cargo bay. The zero-gravity attack. The sedative gas in the command center. The venting of the engine room. She explained her reasoning, her tactics, her use of environment and psychology. The cadets listened with growing respect and horror. The lesson isn't that humans are dangerous, Riley concluded. The lesson is that any species is dangerous when cornered and desperate. You should never underestimate an enemy based on size or age. Evaluate their capability to adapt, to use tools, to cooperate. That's what determines threat level, not physical strength. A cadet raised his hand. Do you regret killing our warriors? Riley met his eyes. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. They killed my mother. They threatened children. I protected my pack. That's not wrong. It's just what predators do when prey fights back. You call yourself prey? Humans were prey for thousands of years on Earth. Big predators hunted us. We survived by being clever, not strong. We learned to use tools. We learned to work together. We learned that the best defense is refusing to be easy targets. She smiled without humor. Your warriors thought they were hunting prey on that station. They were wrong. We were predators. We just don't look like it. The lecture ended with thoughtful silence. Later, the academy commander thanked her privately. You've given us much to consider. Perhaps we have been too confident in our natural advantages. Riley left the Krell homeworld feeling strange. She just helped the people who killed her mother become better warriors. But maybe that was the point. Maybe understanding each other was how you prevented future conflicts. Maybe teaching them respect for human capabilities would save lives in the long run. 2 years after the incident, Riley turned 14. The nightmares were less frequent now. The guilt was manageable. She still saw a therapist, but only once a month. She was learning to be both Riley and Badger, the girl and the survivor, the child and the fighter who had saved 37 lives. She received a gift from the pack. A custom patch with a honey badger on it and the words "We persist" underneath. All 37 survivors wore them now, a reminder of what they'd survived and what they'd learned. Riley put the patch on her backpack and went to school. Normal classes, normal homework, normal teenage drama. But she knew she'd never really be normal again. None of them would. They'd seen too much, done too much, survived too much, but maybe that was okay. Maybe normal was overrated. Maybe what mattered was persistence. Keep going, keep adapting, keep surviving. That was what humans did. That was what she'd taught the galaxy. And no one expected a child to fight back. But Riley had. And in doing so, she'd proven something important about humanity. They weren't the strongest species. They weren't the toughest. But they were the species that refused to quit. The species that turned any environment into an advantage. The species that survived. And if you cornered them, if you threatened their pack, they became as relentless and dangerous as the animal Riley's mother had loved studying. The honey badger that didn't care about size or odds or fear. That just kept fighting until it won or couldn't fight anymore. The galaxy learned that lesson well. And Riley made sure they never forgot it.